Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we have a very sharp, very targeted mission. We're taking a deep breath and plunging straight into the APR InDesign source material. Specifically, we're looking at the feedback from that recent SI4 Google Doc. The goal here is to build a concrete strategy for you, Isaac, to really push your sustained investigation forward.
That's right. We are zeroing in on your body of work.
Yeah.
And what we want to do is translate that critique, all that feedback, into immediate action items. We're focusing entirely on pushing the visual evolution and getting to what the AP board calls skillful synthesis in your pieces.
Yeah, and we're going to tackle this in, I guess, 3 layers. First, we need to get clear on what that feedback really means about where the work is right now. Second, we'll look at how the AP structure itself, the 15 images, those character limits, how it's all designed to force this exact moment of growth.
And finally, we'll give you some tools, like specific critique methods, to make sure every single revision you make is pushing the work conceptually and formally, not just, making another version of the same thing.
Okay, so let's unpack this. Your sustained investigation, your SI question, is conceptually excellent. It's how can I take MTB and express movement in nature and creativity in a 3D art form?
Right.
It's clear, it's personal, it's specific. It's a great question.
And what's so fascinating here, and maybe a little frustrating for you, is the contradiction in the critique.
Yeah.
Because they all praise the execution, universally. We saw comments like, the pieces are really well made, and one person noted the unusual nature of the artwork as it was uniquely creative. So you've absolutely nailed the craftsmanship part.
But hold on, if the craftsmanship is so high and the idea is clear, there are MTB jumps in the yard, how can the assessment still be flagging?
Because the work is currently high on function, but low on form. And the critique is incredibly consistent on this. One person said it plainly, I don't think that he is using the elements of art yet. Another one felt there was, and I'm quoting here, all function and not a lot of form. So they're excellent ramps, but they're not yet excellent visual expressions of an idea.
Wow, that is such a tough spot to be in. You build this beautifully functional object, but the assessor is looking for, it's like they want an artistic thesis statement embedded right in the shape and the line.
Exactly. And if you look back at your own inquiry, the key missing visual piece is movement. You ask, how can I express movement? But the materials you're using, the wood, the screws, all assembled for structural integrity, they inherently express solidity, rigidity, function. The movement is just implied by the bike. It's not actually visualized by the form itself.
So the sources suggest a successful SI has to focus on deepening connections between ideas, materials, and processes, and showing growth, experimentation, and refinement, both conceptually and visually.
Right. And the feedback is basically saying that the idea of movement hasn't yet been skillfully synthesized with the visual form of the wooden screws.
Okay, so if that's the problem, let's pivot. Let's look at the mandate. Because the AP structure is designed for this exact challenge. It's meant to force this evolution.
We're talking about synthesis being baked right into the assessment.
And this is where, really understanding the rules becomes a creative catalyst. Your sustained investigation is 60% of your score. It requires 15 images. And those images are not 15 different finished ramps. They have to show your inquiry, your practice, experimentation, and revision over time. The assessor needs to see a story.
The assessor is not just grading the final object, they are grading the journey. Those 15 images have to clearly demonstrate that skillful synthesis, that merging of materials, processes, and ideas, showing how you developed the work, took the critique, and actually applied it.
And crucially, then you have the selected works section. That's 40% of the score. It asks for 5 final pieces that best demonstrate skillful synthesis. You might pull them from your SI, but they have to be your absolute best, most synthesized works.
And here's a critical detail that makes every change you make really high stakes. The written evidence part. You only get 600 characters for the inquiry statement and another 600 to describe the development. That is incredibly tight. So every change, adding a stripe of paint, 3D printing a model, it has to be a concise, evidence-based response to your question. You have to log it as revision.
Which brings us straight to process documentation, and we cannot overstate this. You need proof of your visual evolution. The sources demand you submit images of your ongoing practice, experimentation, and revision. That means sketches, models, plans, diagrams, anything that can provide insight on your inquiry, thinking, and making.
Right. If you just submit 15 finished pieces that all look functionally similar, you haven't shown evolution. You have to show the change.
So that leads us right to the action plan. And luckily, the critics weren't just negative.
No, not at all. They were prescriptive. They
Right.
basically gave you specific assignments that directly address how to bring form and movement into the work.
Let's walk through those suggestions. They're telling how to fix the low form problem. First immediate fix suggested was introducing color or marking. Someone wrote, maybe by painting the pieces or how he stacks them up to get the elements of art in there.
That's line, color, and composition immediately entering the picture.
The second suggestion is fascinating because it forces you out of that large functional scale.
Mm.
Experiment 3D printing these artworks in small scale and play around with the layouts of MTB to better show movement.
And this intentional shift in scale and material is the very essence of AP experimentation. You're supposed to test different materials, techniques, and compositions that best express their concepts.
Wait a second. So if you 3D print the pieces,
Mm.
you're not really building a ramp anymore. You're building a sculpture of a ramp. That completely shifts the focus from function to form, which is exactly what the critique is asking for.
Exactly. And the third suggestion was just as strong. Integrate actual action into the documentation. Maybe photographing himself or others using the jump. That could be a cool evolution. Or to include real movements from MTBs.
Mm-hmm.
This forces a synthesis between the static object and the dynamic concept you're chasing.
That does raise a really necessary point about digital tools, though, especially if you move into photography or 3D printing. The sources are clear that digital editing of your images, so Photoshop, Procreate, is allowed, but only to ensure the clearest, most accurate representation of your physical artwork.
But, and this is a major ethical caution, the use of generative AI tools is a
Mhm.
complete prohibition. Across the board, that means no ChatGPT, no DALL-E, no Midjourney, not even those generative fill options in software like Photoshop. Do not use them at any point.
And if you do use reference photos, let's say of a specific bike stunt or some design you find inspirational, you have to cite it. You get 100 characters or less for that citation. And most importantly, your final piece has to extend beyond mere duplication and demonstrate your observable transformation.
You have to make it new. You have to synthesize it through your own work.
So you have the action items. The question now is, how do you critically assess your new work to make sure it's actually moving past that functional ramp identity?
You need an objective framework.
Since the core problem is the lack of visible visual elements, you have to apply formal analysis to your own work. Don't look at it as a ramp builder anymore. Look at it as a pure sculptor.
This means isolating and really scrutinizing the principles of design. Balance, contrast, unity, and especially rhythm to express that movement. Then you examine the pure visual elements: line, shape, color, texture, composition.
Okay, so here's the challenge. Let's call it the bike test. Can the piece be understood as an expression of dynamic movement without seeing the bike on it?
Ooh, I like that.
If the answer is no, then the formal elements, the lines you paint, the shapes you make by layering, the rhythm of the screws, they need to be strengthened to imply that motion on their own.
And since your SI question talks about nature and creativity, you can go even deeper with other critique lenses. Try contextual analysis.
Mm.
Explore how your personal context, your love for mountain biking, shapes how people see these rugged, functional objects.
Or go full semiotic analysis. Focus on signs and symbols. Does the raw, unfinished wood symbolize nature or ruggedness? Do the metal screws become visual symbols of tension or speed instead of just being fasteners?
Use these lenses to elevate your construction materials into artistic components. Use critique to rework a visual problem. That's how you make sure your changes are evidence-based and directly solving that lack of movement and form.
Okay, so to summarize, your key moves are simple, but they're demanding. First, you have to address the lack of form by immediately bringing in formal elements: color, dynamic lines, shifting the composition.
Second, use those specific suggestions from the critique. Experiment with 3D printing and scale. Incorporate photography the action.
And third, prioritize that process documentation. You have to show the thinking, the sketches, the failed tests, the revisions, all of it.
Remember, the sources say that to discover something new, you have to risk failure. True visual evolution means making big, sometimes uncomfortable changes based on the critique you received.
So considering your goal here, expressing movement in a 3D form, we have one final thought experiment for you. What happens if, instead of 15 images of ramps, you submit a detailed, highly stylized architectural concept drawing? or maybe a floor plan of your jump structure.
Hmm.
The sources note that divergent forms, like a 2D drawing and a 3D portfolio, can be successful if they are clearly related to the investigation of stated questions, and they demonstrate that synthesis of materials, processes, and ideas.
So could a drawing of the concept itself, the trajectory, could that be the ultimate form of visual synthesis for movement?
Something to mull over as you start this next rigorous phase of your visual evolution.